Hello, ETF fans. Mike here with your daily video insight. Today, I want to dive into a little bit detail on themes, and specifically, a question we get a lot from our user base here at ETF Action is, if I'm going to utilize thematic ETFs as a satellite position within my client portfolios, within my model portfolios for my clients, how much exposure do I already have to these themes? Like, where do I understand what themes are adding new securities, exposure to companies that I don't already have a material allocation to versus companies that like a NVIDIA or a Meta or an Apple, which we know are major components of your broad composites such as the S&P 500 or the MSCI All Country World Index. So to get started, first I want to take a quick review of the thematic space, and we're going to highlight just kind of how ETF Action breaks down thematic ETFs, and then I'll dive into more specifics utilizing specific ETFs and their overlap allocation to the to the two various major composites. So first and foremost, let's take a look at our thematic dashboard. So if you go to ETF dashboards, equity thematic, we group this by our segment. So the broad segment of the theme, and then secondarily by the more specific group. So for example, if I'm looking at natural resources, it's broken down into 54 natural resources funds, but if I open it up, you can see there's 9 broad-based natural resources, 8 metals and mining, 5 ETFs focused on nuclear, really fall into natural resources because they're high allocation to energy, materials, etc. And I could go through each and every one of these: disruptive tech, cybersecurity, internet, cloud computing. Always encourage people to use the charts tool to just get a sense of the breakdown of the thematic space, the growth, or in this case, the pullback in the space of assets under management, currently setting at 157 billion across these ETFs, peaked at the end of 2021 with just under 200 billion. And then, of course, you can look at flows across different time frames. So, mixed bag here of flows across these different broad-based themes. That's the broad landscape, right? So I encourage you to take a look at our classification system. It's a very clean way to navigate these more niche strategies across the different thematic space. But for today, really what I want to focus in on is, if I'm looking at a thematic ETF, how do I know if it's really providing differentiated exposure to my core allocations within my models or within my clients' accounts? So to do that, I'm going to go into our ETF database. And to save time in this video, I've been told I need to start saving time and going a little faster. I created a watch list called ACWI, so the MSCI All Country World ETF versus themes. What I did is I went through all of the more tech slash growth type themes that we classify across our categories and picked the largest, most liquid, broad-based theme in each one of those categories. So you can see here, if I expand my category column, you can see that I've got ACWI, obviously, being the global large cap blend, representation of the entire World Stock Exchange MSCI index. I have included the Global X Robotics and Artificial Intelligence, high overlap with the thematic industrial revolution category. iClean's thematic sustainability, their clean energy ETF, the largest in the category. S&P Spider, Kensho New Economies, multi-sector thematic ETF. So this is a blend of all of their more niche thematic sectors. The Global X FinTech ETF, broad-based representation of different fintech strategies. The Fidelity Disruptive Technology, a broad-based representation of technology companies or companies with high-tech usage and their allocation across different themes within the tech space. Global X Social Media really captures a lot of the evolving consumer trends out there across millennials, the social media ETF, and how folks are utilizing the internet. And then the Fidelity Disruptive Medicine ETF, which is a broad-based health innovation strategy. So I utilize these three because they're, one, broad-based, two, these 7 ETFs to compare against ACWI because they're broad-based. They're global in nature, so ACWI is a global fund. And what I want to do is really dial in to see, how much exposure do these ETFs have in common. Before I do that, just real quick, note the classification system, as well as so you can get a full breakdown of how we look at these ETFs, whether they're active, whether they're passive, how do they implement, how do they weight their portfolios, give you a sense of how these portfolios are constructed. And the other thing I would always point out is our derived analytics are an excellent way to get a objective, rules-based breakdown of these strategies to understand, are they mostly are they a global exposure? Are they U.S. exposure? Are they sector diversified, sector concentrated, mostly large cap, mid cap, style assignment, as well as all of your different factor ratings? Excellent way to get an objective profile of the strategy relative to the world indexes out there represented by the MSCI Investable Market Index. So with that in mind, really what I want to illustrate is just simple overlap. How much exposure do these strategies have in common? So to do that, I'm going to highlight all of these strategies. Notice as I did that, what it did is it lit up my little tools panels to the right of my ticker bar up here. So I can save this group. I can compare them side by side in our compare frame up top. I can build a correlation matrix. But for today, what I really want to do is I just want to focus on pure overlap. So I'm going to use this overlap analyzer tool. And it's going to generate, what it did is it loaded all those ETFs into our fund overlap tool in our home office section. And it's going to plot the number of companies that are identical inside of each strategy to one another and how much weight they have in common. And so when I say overlap weight, what we're saying is if portfolio A has 2% in Apple and portfolio B has 1% in Apple, their overlap is 1%. Our tool automatically does that for every security inside of every one of these ETFs to tell you how many names are in common and what's the total overlap percentage. And so what I want to do is I want to focus in on this ACWI line here and see how much commonality do we have with ACWI. So if I look at bots, I can see there's 11 names. So only 11 names inside of bots are also in ACWI and a 4.7% overlap. Clearly, if I'm allocating to bots, I'm not going to get much exposure, duplicative exposure to what I'd have in that ACWI exposure, which is a broad representation of all your major composites like the S&P 1500, the MSCI EFA, MSCI emerging markets, right? The ACWI is going to capture all of those major indexes. FINX, few extra names, so 15 names, but even lower exposure, meaning that since ACWI is a market capitalization index, the 15 names that FINX does have in common with ACWI are much smaller names, right? So they have a lower weighting in ACWI, and that's why it adds up to a smaller overlap. Comp, as you'd expect, a much broader index, does have a lot of overlap in terms of names, so 180 names in common with ACWI, but still a pretty small overlap at 13.9%, especially considering comp is really a representation of all of the thematic ETFs or designed to be a representation of the majority of the thematic ETFs that are out there. Further, if I look at this, I can see that the disruptive tech, not surprising, fewer names here, but the highest overlap. And that just stands to reason because right now technology makes up such a large component of your major composites. Your big names like Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple, I'm certain are all in the Fidelity disruptive tech, and therefore you're seeing a large percentage overlap because ACWI, because of their market capitalization, they have a much bigger representation in ACWI. iClean, 26 names, basically no overlap percentage-wise. If I go over here to social, 14 names, 5%, and then the Fidelity disruptive medicine, 28 names, 3.9%. So clearly, if I look across these strategies, there is very little overlap. It doesn't mean you should go out and buy these. It's not a recommendation. It's just letting you know that if you're looking to kind of justify or understand, is this strategy going to be additive to my portfolio, or is it really just going to be more of the same with a different name? A great way to do that is using our fund overlap tool. The last thing I'll point out here is if you do scroll down on this page, you'll have every single security plotted out. You'll have the number of funds that it's held in, the average weight that it's held across those funds. So I can see NVIDIA's in 4 out of the 8 strategies. If I open up NVIDIA, I can see it's a very large holding in Global X Robotics, Artificial Technology, Fidelity Disruptive Tech, 4.17% in ACWI, and then it has a very small 27 basis point allocation in Kensho. And I could do this across the board. If you're a premium user, you can right click and export this to Excel to do more in-depth research. And then the last thing I would note, if you're looking for a little different way to view that, you can come back to the database. You can use the compare tab, which is going to plot out all of your return data, your risk data, your composition data, your fundamental data on a side-by-side data, but it also provides an equity holdings grid. So I can go through here and see, if I sort this by, if I'm looking at this across here, I can go through and plot all of my different securities and see, what are my top holdings in each one of these funds and how much overlap are there on a more traditional grid matrix. So that was today's breakdown. Really wanted to show you some of the tools to look at that exposure in the thematic space, how to understand whether it's additive to your portfolio. If you have any questions, like always, reach out to team@ETF Action. Create an account, ETF Action, if you haven't already done it. Most of these tools I illustrated today are free. The only difference is you won't be able to download if you're not a premium user. But the tools themselves, for the most part, are free and a great resource for you. All you got to do is create an account. No credit card required. So thanks for watching today's video and have a wonderful day.